Okay, welcome back. This is going to be a video on the in-game settings. So
30 seconds until minions spawn.
the video settings are going to be most important, but there are settings throughout that are important. Hotkeys are going to be a lot of personal preference, but quick cast is much faster than everything else. So, we always recommend to a lot of new players that you start using quick cast. And then obviously most people are already using quick cast. The buttons that you put your stuff on, though, is really up to personal preference. So, for example, I've moved trinket to T for trinket and then moved my numbers around, but you don't have to do all that. And then for abilities and summoner spells, what you're going to notice is that if you come down here, you're going to have a bunch of things set down here. And basically what that's allowing you to do is if you hold down a button while you use an ability, it'll allow you to quick cast it. But since we've already quick cast all of our abilities, what we actually want the ability to do is to be able to cast an ability normally if we want to do that with a certain ability. So for example, here I'm holding Shift Q on Braum and it's showing me what the range on that is like and then giving me the indicator, and then I can throw it. And so that way I can both do a normal cast if I really want to for some reason, or I can do my normal quick cast. So what I've done, right, is I've moved all of these that were down here up to normal cast, since we already have everything quick cast. And a lot of people don't ever do that once they quick cast their abilities. But this will allow you to be able to normal cast certain abilities. For example, if you're playing like a rumble and you want to rumble ult normally, you can use Shift and R instead of having to rebind your R key every time you're playing a different champion that may or may not want to use a normal cast on a certain ability. Just don't use, we just haven't used quick cast with indicator, but these kinds of things are personal preference, again, with the exception of the fact that quick cast is much faster than everything else. And self cast, these should already be set by default, but you can press Alt E on yourself to shield yourself on like a Janna and things like that. That's important to know. When you're learning the game, even though a lot of these settings are going to be default, it is important to know what you can do in the game. And so by going through all of these, you'll learn, even if you already have an idea of most of these, by going through all these settings, you'll learn everything that you could possibly do in the game. And then we have these things off. And then you can level up your spells using Control and Q. And, people have different personal preferences as to how they do that with their hand. But, for me, I kind of keep my fingers on QWER, or in the early game before you have R. And a lot of times you'll keep your fingers on QWE, and then you'll have your index finger, your main finger, on D or F, so that you can use those summoner spells quickly, especially because until level 6 you don't even have your ult. So having fingers on something like QWE and D would be the best, in the beginning and stuff like that. And then my thumb rests on the space bar, and I can slide that over if I want to do Alt E to E myself, or Control to level up an ability. The tilde key is actually really important, and people don't use it as much as they should. But by turning on this tilde key here, it's to the left of your 1. This key is going to allow you to target champions only. And so if you go over to a turret, you can see I'm clicking right on top of the turret, but I can't right click the turret. It will only auto attack champions. It won't attack minions either. And this opens up a lot of possibilities. If you're ever turret diving, you should turn this on before you start the turret dive. As soon as you think about, okay, I'm going to be turret diving, turn this on and start using it, so that when you are doing these turret dives, it helps. But this is actually something I've started to incorporate into my gameplay a lot more than just turret diving. That's the main use, and during fights when you want to make sure that you're hitting people and not accidentally hitting a champion. But anytime you're fighting someone, you should be turning this on so that you're not accidentally hitting minions. And as a support, where you don't have to be hitting minions all the time, it's actually convenient to leave this on almost all of the time, in my opinion, because when there are minions in the lane, you can click right through the minions. Let's get some minions in here real quick. I can click on top of the enemy minions and I can move around that way. So if you had this off, what happens is when I enter a right click over here, it starts dragging me to attack the minion. And so if you're running around like this, you know, you can do little things like this where you accidentally stutter and auto cancel onto a minion. But if you have this on, you can click in more places to move around the lane, and so your movement is less predictable, in my opinion, because you're able to click in different spots to move your character in different directions other people wouldn't be able to move into if they didn't have this on. Even on other roles, AD carry, top, mid, using this so that you can click in different spots you wouldn't normally be able to click to move without accidentally hitting the minion could be quite good, and something that people don't utilize a lot. Another trick is while you have this on, you can actually still use attack move to hit things. So for example, if you're comfortable using attack move a lot or all of the time on AD carry, you can still use attack move to auto attack to last hit, but have this on so that when you're, when you go to trade, you don't do it. It's actually a bit unfortunate though that attack move doesn't work with it, because it also means if you're diving under tower, and you attack move, you can still end up hitting the turret. So make sure when you're diving under tower like this that you're intentional with your auto attacks to right click them instead of using attack move under the tower, because even if you have this on, you'll still hit the tower or a minion on accident if you use attack move. Another thing about this I was going to mention is for some champions, like Braum, for example, can W to a minion, and then that way, he can gain range. So a common combo that I see a lot on my main champion, on Braum, is you're going to W forward to a minion, and then auto the enemy champion, and then hit them with Q. But if you turn this, and it's actually quite frustrating, because what you really want to do is you really want to be able to turn this auto attack champion only thing on, so that when you W forward to a minion, you get your auto attack off on that person and you don't accidentally hit a minion, because you're going to be Wing right into a minion wave like this, but their champion will be here and you want to click them without clicking the minions. So you want to turn this on and then W, but look, you can't, because it won't even let you target your own minions, right? And so you can't jump to your own minions if you have that on. So certain champions that can use abilities on their own minions, like a Lulu being able to E her own minions to maybe get in range for a Q or something like that, although that's kind of a rare thing to do, or especially on Braum, probably most prevalently, if you have this on, you can't W forward to a minion. So when you do your combo, you have to W forward to a minion and then hit the tilde key as you're Wing or after your W has gone off, and then auto attack them and then Q. So that's quite important to understand how this works, rather than just telling people to use it. Obviously B to recall, and champion-specific interactions are pretty random stuff, not really important. I think they're mostly cosmetic. But for example, Kaisa can remove her face mask when you do Shift F6, and then for other champions, like for Braum, I don't think that there are anything here. So that covers the abilities and summoner spells. Then items. I've just done this. It's the same thing, right? Remember, we've quick casted all of our items, and so we can move all of these secondary options for a different way of casting the ability to a normal cast instead of a quick cast. Actually, though, so if you wanted to do this with Trinket, you can. And by not quick casting Trinket, one of the things you can do is when you're going to place the ward in the bush, it'll turn green, and if the ward is going to fall outside of the bush, it'll be blue. So this ward is outside of the bush, so if we move away here, you can see that we can't. I mean, it looks like you can see in the bush anyways, actually, to be honest with you. Hard to tell unless we, maybe if we throw a target dummy in there, we can see. Yeah, we can see it anyways. Well, anyways, it's supposed to work, where if it's green, it's going in the bush, and if it's blue, it's out of the bush. But, I don't know, that was blue for sure, was it not? But anyways, so this can be helpful for hitting kind of maybe difficult warding positions or something like that. By holding Shift T, if you don't already take this off of quick cast. But I just quick casted, I'm used to doing it. For the rest of the stuff, you have, you know, the ability to self-cast items on yourself, of course. Alt-T actually doesn't work, although the cooldown's down right now. Let's see if we can refresh the cooldown. So I'm pressing Alt-T right now. It doesn't actually drop a trinket on top of me. I think that'd be kind of cool. So this is kind of useless, actually. So that wraps up the items. Player movement. Again, these things are personal preference, but I'll run through what they do with you. Player move click, this is your right click, your ability to move around, so you can set that to whatever you want. Player attack move click, you know, so this is the attack move that I was showing earlier. People use all kinds of different stuff. This one is like shift. Some people use left click. I tend to prefer to use A because it shows the range when I attack move. Hold position and stop position are two different keys that you can set up that do different things. And by default, hold is H and stop is S. And as you can see, I've repurposed hold for something else. So I've taken this setting away by unbinding it, and my stop position is still there. So what a stop position will do is when you press S like this, you will stop moving as soon as you press S. And you can do things like this, like stutter your movement a little bit, and at a higher level especially, this will really mess with people, almost makes them feel like they're, you know, like, it does look like, you know, like lag. It's annoying, and so you can mess with your opponent. You can suddenly stop when they're expecting you to keep moving. And so this is something I would weave into your movement at a higher level of play. To be honest, at lower level of play, they probably think you're just like being dumb. And the sporadic movement might actually not throw them off. They might just actually think that you're clicking so slow that you're stopping like this or something like that. And that's very different than intentionally stopping like this to jitter your opponent and throw them off. So hold position will stop you in place, but then if anything comes near you, you'll attack it. That's why you're holding a position. Whereas stop position stops anything that you're doing to make sure that you don't hit anything. I'll throw an example in here because I've been kind of doing some detailed examples of how these settings are useful. If you get pulled into tower by like a blitzcrank or something like that, or you get hit with a Morgana binding under tower or a Lux binding, a lot of times your character will automatically auto attack once you get CC'd. And if you hold the S key after you get pulled and then, you know, don't click them and then run away, you won't take tower aggro if you have minions there. So a lot of times we'll see situations where people will get pulled into the tower, but they have their minion wave there, so they're not going to get hit by the turret, but then they accidentally hit the person, or their champion automatically hits the person, and that ends up drawing tower aggro. Whereas if you hold stop when you get pulled like that, it'll prevent you from taking tower aggro if you already had other stuff tanking the minions. Another absolutely OP great use of the S key is if you get hit with CCs that are going to move you, like a Charm or a Renata ult. Honestly, I think this is a bit of a bug, but it's just the way that the game works, so I would absolutely utilize it. When you get hit with CC like that, like a Charm, if you spam S, if you don't hold it, but if you spam S, it'll stop your movement while you're getting charmed to them. in a way that makes it difficult for them to hit a follow-up ability because they expect you to, you know, run forward with the slow at them, but instead you do like something like this towards them. And so it can make it more difficult and cause them to potentially whiff the ability, or in the case of Renata ult, it'll actually get you to not auto attack your teammates because you'll be stopping yourself, and every time you go to auto, it'll cancel your auto attack. So you can essentially input some very quick stop commands and it will stop you from doing that, which is quite essential on Braum, because actually Braum will apply his passive to his own teammates, and then the enemy can utilize that to stun Braum's own teammates if he gets hit with Renata ult. So that's a really powerful counter to Braum. But if you're a really good Braum player and you hit S so that you never actually land an auto attack on your teammate by spamming S like this over and over again and canceling every auto when you're trying to attack your teammate like this, by being able to do something like that when you're Renata ulted, you're going to not put passive on them, and all of a sudden Renata's not that good of a counter to Braum, so it's quite big. I basically figured that this comes down to another setting that we have on. A lot of people turn this one off, full disclosure, and that is auto attack. Auto attack is like if I come over here, my character starts auto attacking this minion even though I did not click it. So if I just move my champion and he stops like near a minion, or a minion walks into him, I'm kind of holding by default. That's essentially what the auto attack setting does, is it says when I stop moving, do I stop and not attack anything, or do I hold? And a lot of people prefer the auto attack setting off because it's kind of the game going ahead and doing something that they didn't actually input. But I prefer it on, and really that's personal preference, and I can understand and see why people want to have it off, but it doesn't really matter. It's really personal preference, just so that you understand that either you have stop by default when you stop moving, or you have hold by default. And so I kind of have hold by default. There's no point for me to have hold, because if I just press S, right? If I come over here and press S, now I'm not hitting them. But if I come over here and I just right click towards this area, then I'll start hitting stuff. Or, you know, if I just right click to this area and I'm just standing here, as long as I don't press S, when minions eventually come into me, I'll start hitting them anyways. So I'm always in hold position without ever having to hit hold. So I've taken this key away and used it on another setting. And then move pet click. This is if you're playing like an Annie or something like that, you need to move tibbers around. You can use Alt or Control with mouse button 2, and that will move your tibbers around. I think that's default. Camera control, I've left all the same, except for the F keys actually. So by default, the F keys are F1 through 5, with you being F1. But you already have multiple ways to get back to yourself if you're unlocked. You can hit spacebar to get back to yourself. You can hit Y to get back to yourself. So there's no reason why you need to have a third key where if I hit F1, I can go back to myself. So instead, what I've done is I've simplified the F keys on my teammates by making it so that F1 through F4 are my 4 teammates. And so what those keys do is if I had teammates in this game and I hit F1, you know, it'd like take me to, I actually am not sure whether AD carries F1 or top lane's F1, but it'll take you to your F1 teammate and then to your F2 teammate, etc., on the leaderboard. So it should be, you know, again, I forget the order, but I think it would be F1 would take you to top lane, F2 would take you to your jungler, F3 would take you to your mid laner, and F4 would take you to your AD carry. And so this is useful for being able to quickly look around the map without having to click like this, which is a little bit less accurate because you can accidentally click an area where you don't see as much information. It's slower than just pressing a key on your keyboard. And when you want to cycle through them very quickly, for example, when you get Nocturne ulted, you want to know where your team is getting Nocturne ulted at, but you have that Fog of War on. Well, you can see his shadow on the ground, and so you can hit F1, F2, F3, F4 and kind of cycle through your teammates and see the area that your team's getting hit in and then path that way. And that's the fastest way to discover where Nocturne's ulting if you're not in comms or people don't ping it. Let's see, what else have we got here? Other than that, I think these things are default on the camera control side of things. And display, I think these things are also default, which is just Control F. Hitting Control F will display your ping and your FPS, which you want to see to make sure that you're not having performance dips and to know when your FPS is low, and maybe you should think twice about fighting if you're getting a drop or a dip or something like that. Communication is really important. This is where you have all of your pings, and it's really important to have a good setup with your pings, whatever your preference is with them. By default, you're going to have a lot of things that I don't think are set up that great. For example, the alert ping will be on G, but it won't be the quick alert ping. And the quick alert ping is just going to instantly G rather than me having to click it and then, like if it was set here, it gives me this thing first and then I have to left click. So it's like a normal cast ability, right? You want your pings to be just as fast. So by setting G to this quick alert ping, I can instantly just press G, and wherever my mouse was at the time, it's going to ping it. And then if I hold down G, I can go to the right for on my way, go to the left for enemy missing, go up for danger, and go down for assist me. And then you've got some other pings. So you've got a retreat ping, which is a normal V ping would be a retreat ping. But this danger ping is better than the general retreat ping, the yellow one, because it's louder and the symbol is stronger. And so I've just gone ahead and switched away from the retreat ping and to the danger ping. So I know we can already cast the danger ping by hitting G and dragging up, but that's a little bit more work than just clicking V. So I have V set up there. Then missing enemy is very important, and you're doing that a lot during a game. So I have that set to X, just so that I can, just like the danger ping, quickly utilize that ping as well. Then this is what we've gone ahead and used H for. There's an area is warded ping, which is new and quite important, newish and quite important, and it's not bound by default to any key, so you need to set that up with some key, whether you switched H or not. You need to set this up with some key so that you can ping when an area is warded, so your jungler doesn't waste their time ganking a spot they shouldn't gank, so that if somebody else has sweeper up and yours is down, or if you're not playing a role with sweeper, you can ping where you've seen wards being placed, so that your support can avoid them while roaming, so that your jungler can avoid them, so that everybody can avoid enemy wards and or clear them. And it's really good to communicate where those wards are for your team for those reasons. Then we've got, these emote kind of situation things here. Then you've got actual emotes. And one of the things that I like to do is find an animation that is particularly pronounced in the first second of the animation, where some kind of large movement is happening. Like, for example, this. But on each champion that would be different. And unfortunately, if you're playing multiple different champions, this isn't really something you're going to try to go in and change every game. But I try to pick an animation that's quite pronounced that could maybe, and work this into my movement, so to really throw off the enemy at a higher level, right, rather than just clicking around very fast or just stuttering back and forth, we can throw in some stopping in there. We can throw in some stuttering with Z. We can throw in like this. Maybe they think this is even the opening of my ult animation or something like that, anything to give you some kind of edge. And so I would pick something that has a kind of a pronounced ability. For example, if I did something like the taunt, that's kind of a decent animation. It's maybe a little bit slow, but if you do some of these other things, maybe like the laugh, you see how if I were to spam this animation, even that animation does something. That might even be better. He kind of looks like he's going down to cast the ult. And so you see what I mean, though, is you can add animations like this into what you're doing and kind of throw people off because they haven't seen that animation before and they don't know what you're doing. And then the rest of them I just have default. So I've specifically set up a button that I can spam like S that kind of gives my animation some different different stuff going on and incorporate that into the way that I play. And also to tilt people, of course. And then extended chat history I've set to N. A lot of these things aren't default, but you're just going to want to make sure that they're on keys. And I would just really ask yourself, just look at your keyboard and run through QWERTYUIOP and all of the other keys on the other lines of your keyboard, and just ask yourself, what do each of these buttons do? Do I have things like in reasonable spots? Like, okay, QWER is your abilities. For me, I have T for trinket. You know, Y unlocks and locks my camera. U shows the scoreboard, but instead of a toggle like tab, it stays up there until I hit U again. I don't think does anything. O doesn't do anything. P for purchase or shop, and that's fine. A for the attack move. S to stop. D and F are my summoner spells. G to use the smart pings, H for the area thwarted ping, and then I think, again, the last three keys, J, K, and L don't do anything on this row. Z is my dance move. X, we'll get into this, is my Mia ping. C should show, what is this? Looks like my emotes, but for some reason, my emotes are just blank, like I don't have any set. That's really weird. And then V, again, is my danger ping. B to recall. N to show the extended chat history. So for example, if you pasted some summoner spell timers in here or needed to see one that was pinged, you could hit N to see the extended chat history. And then I've moved a lot of these around, but then M I have to see the advanced champion stats. So, and then again, here I have my quick emote wheel on C. And then the menus, we talked about. U shows scoreboard, except it permanently shows it as a toggle. And the hold version of that is tab. And then F9 toggles your mouse being locked into your screen. But I mean, I'm playing on full screen, so. The system menu, right, the settings is escape, and the advanced player stats like we showed are on M. And then toggle basic player stats. This is if it'll show this box down here at all, is on Control C, and I don't like to show it because I don't need that information all the time and it takes up a little part of the screen. Then we've got the item shop, which I believe I've left things by default over here. And practice tool, these are all kinds of different commands you can do here in practice tool, and I've left those as default.
Your team has
I don't have my
destroyed a
auto
turret.
attack move on left click, obviously. You can get rid of these minions too. Now for the video settings, which are quite important. Let's see if full screen messes with OBS actually. Yeah, it does. So normally I would recommend full screen here on the Windows mode. The reason why I'm doing it on borderless is because even if I'm alt tabbed from the game, my OBS will still pick up movement in the game, whereas it'll freeze if I have it on full screen. So full screen's the best for performance, but borderless if you're trying to stream, I guess, and you can't get it to work on full screen like me. And then your resolution should be your monitor's default native resolution. Colorblind mode is personal preference. With colorblind mode on, like I have here, your health bar will be yellow, and with it off, your health bar will be green. It's just up to you. Use relative team colors makes it so that regardless of your starting side, all allied minions and structures will be blue and enemy units are red. So this makes it so that all the enemy minions are red and all of my minions are blue. Even if I was on red side, my minions and towers would show blue and theirs would show red. If you have this off, you'll get this weird effect where it'll tell you that they're on blue side because their minions will still be blue, but they'll have a red health bar letting you know that they're an enemy and that you should be killing them. But that's a little bit confusing having multiple colors in there like that. And you should be able to tell which side of the map you're on just in your head because you've been playing the game on that side of the map for the past 20 minutes or whatever. But, based on the side of the map that you're on. If you're down here and you have the nice camera view, if you're locked, then that's blue side. And if you're up here, then on the top, then you're red side. We don't want our screen to be shaking for any reason. That would be quite stupid. Hide eye candy is going to hide, your little squirrel and stuff like that in the river. Apparently this frog makes it, which is great, but this is, going to increase your performance a tiny amount. And then for graphics quality, I have all of the graphics quality set to very low and shadow set to off. It may be interesting here. I'm not 100% sure on this one, so you might want to double check this somewhere else. But there are certain abilities like Zac Jump that might actually cast a shadow early, and so you may want to have shadows on. But I'm not 100% sure on this myself. Character inking displays a dark line around the character, and I like to leave that on because it makes, I think that it makes characters better defined, their edges and borders, and maybe that makes hitting abilities easier. And then of course we have our frame rate uncapped, which we talked about in the previous video. Even if your monitor's resolution is only 144 hertz or 60 hertz, you don't want to cap this at that number, because even though your monitor can only display 60 or 144 hertz, if you produce more frames, when it draws those frames that it'll use as 144 hertz per second or 144 frames per second, it will be drawing from a more recent frame, and therefore you will feel less input lag and see a more recent version of what's going on in the game. Anti-aliasing reduces jagged edges on walls and things like that, but slightly lowers performance, and so we take it off because we're trying to get maximum performance settings, not what looks the best. And we don't want vertical sync on because this reduces your FPS, which again is bad because you'll have more input lag. And then your colors, you can set whatever way you want. My colors are a little bit different than default. I kind of think that you should have a color scheme that makes it very clear where Fog of War is. Fog of War is a little bit deceiving because instead of things being totally black, you can see things as if you could see it here and it's just dark, but you actually don't know anything that's over here. So my personal preference would be to keep the lane looking like this while at the same time be able to make this pitch black, but that's not something you can do with these settings. So I just have come up with settings that keep the lane bright and make it so that you can see what's going on in the game and differentiate abilities from each other while also keeping Fog of War as dark as possible. Then we've got sound settings, and I've got a little trick for you in sound settings. The absolute most important sound that you're going to hear in the game is your teammates' pings. And I know that people's pings can be annoying sometimes, but you can always mute them too. And so what I would do is disable any background noise that isn't adding anything important to the game. So your character's voice, I turn off. The background music, I turn off. And the ambience volume, I turn off. That's like birds and trees rustling and that kind of thing, the wind. And then we have the announcer volume telling you, like, what's going on in the game. So that can be somewhat important. The sound effects volume, which is very important, right? And the pings volume, which is very important. And so one of the things that I've done is, well, I wanted the pings volume higher, right? But I already had it at 100. So what I did is I raised the master volume, kept pings at 100, but then in order to make sure that the sound effects weren't overwhelming, I turned the sound effects down. So by doing this kind of a setup where the announcer and the sound effects are lower, but the pings are higher, and then just turning up your master volume so that actually your sound effects are the same as they were in the beginning, your pings are louder than everything else, while the rest of the game still sounds like normal. And so that's quite good. Then, this stuff is a lot of personal preference. We're going to get kicked out of our own practice tool game. The HUD scale, right, makes this bigger or smaller. And I think that you should be able to see some details on these things. You do actually, whether people want to admit it or not, even at a high level, look at when your abilities are coming off of cooldown, and you do look to see how much mana you have, how much health you have, whether you can cast a certain amount of combos, like a certain combo of abilities together. You add these numbers up sometimes. So you do need to be able to see your HUD, contrary to what a lot of people think. And it doesn't take up too much room, so I try to keep it small while also being able to see it. My cursor scale, again, this is kind of personal preference. Shop scale, personal preference. Chat scale, I just want to be able to see clearly timers and things like that in the chat for summoner spells. And you can see my mini-map is absolutely gigantic, and I really think that the mini-map is such a crucial part of the game and that looking at it is so important. Really, from a high elo player's perspective, you should be watching the mini map and checking your lane every 2 seconds, not playing your lane and watching the mini map every 2 seconds. The game is absolutely played on the mini map, and the minor stuff that happens on your screen is much less important than what happens on your minimap. Now, that being said, you could run with the smaller minimap and still be looking at your minimap all the time and pay attention to what's going on. But I think raising the size of your minimap is a great way to get you to pay attention to it and to be able to see more detail on the map. For example, if two champions are overlapping and your minimap's bigger, you'll be able to see both of them easier than if it's smaller. So it is good to have your minimap be big. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Trust me. Imagine you're playing chess and this is the equivalent of the board that you need to see where pieces are moving around and things like that. And instead you're focused on like the perspective of like one pawn and the surrounding like 5 squares around them. And you're sitting there with your eyes buried in the chessboard and you can only see those 5 squares. And then, a tiny piece of your vision is out in the corner of your eye. You have a little tiny map that shows you the rest of the game that's going on. And in reality, you really want the opposite. If we could have it that way, I'd have 90% of my screen. I mean, maybe that's too ridiculous, but you might want 90% of your, if it was by level of importance, right? You'd want 90% of your screen to be the minimap and 10% to be the game that you're looking at. It's that important. It's that simple. Now, in practicality, you wouldn't benefit from having a map much bigger than this, and so we would leave it this size, even though this stuff is less important than this stuff. But you want it as big as possible, just like your HUD. You want it like as small as possible while still getting all the benefit from it being the size that it is. So try to make it bigger. And then death recap scale and practice tool scale don't really matter, and a personal preference or whatever. Obviously, you want to be able to see people's health bars. You don't need these things to like flow down there. So we've disabled HUD animations for a little bit better performance. We want to see loss of control user interface. That's like, oh, this person got stunned and stuff like that, I do believe. And then we want to see health bar animations, such as your health bar turning red and stuff like that as you take damage. To get an idea of how much damage is being dealt to people. Above the head, I find having people's regular usernames kind of useless, but with all the skins and things like that that are in the game and how ambiguous a lot of the champions are becoming, especially with the skins, I like to have champion names on so that I can identify who I'm fighting against quicker. And I know that's crazy coming from someone who could probably instantly recognize all the champions, but I just think as opposed to having a useless piece of information like somebody's username, having the champion name seems to be much better to me, but it's personal preference, I guess. I don't want my screen flashing on damage. Obviously, I know when I'm taking damage. I don't need my screen to flash when I get CC'd because I know when I'm CC'd, and these are just going to mess with my visuals. Champion highlight on camera center is this thing, and I think that this is nice, although I don't really use that all that often. And I like the legacy cursor, but that's personal preference, and then I don't need the tooltip info or any of that, so that's disabled. And then for abilities, this shows the target frame on attack. I think this shows when you hover over an enemy, like their frame, their model of their champion. Enable line missile display, so we just want to be able to see all this information, your attack range, your spell cost, your displays, like 100 mana for ult, 40 mana for E at this rank, etc. So that you can add up and see if you have enough mana to be able to use certain things. Disable HUD spell click is personal preference, but like I have that disabled. So for example, if I left click Q here, I can't drag it out and then shoot it. Some people would want to be able to do that, but it's not something that ever really gets used. And then you can have this personal preference. You can have minutes and seconds, or you can have seconds to show how long until stuff's up. And you want to be able to see the neutral camps that are up on the map, and you want to be able to move along the mini map. It's annoying sometimes when you accidentally, like if I was trying to click in here, to walk into this bush, and I don't click the bush, I click the mini map, for example. That would be quite annoying because now I'm walking the opposite direction, but that's why you move your camera around like this and like this. This is another reason why actually your map being a certain size or your HUD doesn't matter, because you should just move your camera so that those things are out of the way. And you know, this is coming from someone who was a lock screen player, and one of the things that helped me improve at the game a lot was to go off of lock screen. People will tell me my mini map's too big, but if they were taking their own advice that they had been giving me for years about moving their camera around, they just move their camera out of the way and then move through the bushes normally. So those things should almost never get in your way if you're moving your camera around appropriately. Let's see, so we've got those things. You could have a mini map on the left if you want, it's personal preference, but I do not. The mirrored scoreboard layout just changes, like the champion pictures will show up here in the middle, kind of symmetrical instead of like a list. Doesn't really make a difference. Personal preference. Show summoner names for the second time for some reason, but again, I don't show summoner names. And then I actually preferred having chat off for a while, and maybe I still prefer it, but I'm trying to get back into typing summoner spells and stuff like that, so I have them on right now. But just keep in mind, if you are a toxic player and you can't help yourself but flame your teammates, but you want to win and climb, you should just turn chat off so you don't have to deal with it. If you're frustrated at people flaming you and you get like upset about those kinds of things, then turn chat off, you know, like this, and then you won't be able to see any of it. You definitely want to show timestamps in chat so that when I ping like flash or something like that, I can see here that that was at like 42 minutes and 23 seconds, and then I can say, okay, flash is in 6 minutes, so we add 6 to 42 and we get, or 5 minutes. Did I say 6 minutes? So we're gonna go to 47, 24, you know, something like this, and then you copy paste, blah, blah, blah. Except obviously you would put like, support, you know, like that. And you know, what I'm doing there is Control A and Control C, and then Enter and Control V. It works just like normal on the computer. Emote bubble for seeing emotes that are happening across the map. You don't need that. They're off anyways, but you know, if I want to see it like here, again, my emotes don't work right now for some reason, but you just have the normal size or whatever. That's personal preference. And then I have enemy emotes muted so they can't tilt you by doing that. And then you want all of this information, the damage that's being dealt, the gold that you get from killing certain things, all of this stuff on so that you can see what's going on in the game, experience you're getting when a minion dies, stuff like that. And then as far as the game settings over here, you know, just set up your mouse speed again in accordance with your DPI. So you want your DPI and your mouse to be maxed all the way out, and then you lower your mouse speed to the mouse speed that you want. And then same thing here with your camera. Move camera on revive, it's kind of personal preference. That'll snap your camera back to you when you revive. I don't really know what smooth camera does, but supposedly it smooths your camera when you move it or something. And when I have the screen locked like this or something like that during a fight or during lane, sometimes you can have per side offset would be better than other kinds of offsets. And like we talked about earlier, you can have auto attack on or off, and I have it on, but a lot of players prefer it off so that you don't accidentally attack stuff you don't mean to, so that you aren't sitting in a bush and then hit something as it moves into you and reveal yourself, that kind of stuff. Use movement prediction. It's really important to turn this off. It sounds like a setting you'd want on, but as I talked about in the last video for your graphics settings, if you have this on and you have high FPS, it'll cause you to jitter around like crazy. Maybe even here we could get it to do it. Yeah, it'll look like this, which is terrible, right? So by turning that off, that'll fix this problem. But that problem will start up again anyways if you have really, really high FPS, I think. So I don't know what to do about that. And this is just turret indicators in co-op games, so you don't need to worry about that, but you can have that on or off if you want. And then attack move on cursor is an important one, because attack move on cursor means that if I attack like this with my attack move, it's going to attack the closest thing to my cursor, right? The closest thing to what I attacked, rather than attacking the closest thing to my champion. Sometimes attack move with this off, if this is off, attack move will just hit whatever's closest to you, even if it's nowhere near your cursor. But if you want to use this as a regular auto attack to last it and things like that, then you can throw this out at certain targets. Another tip about using attack move is that attack move can be great if you're wanting to move into a bush like this. Oh great, we had the target dummy in there from earlier, perfect. So you can see how what I've done here is, because I have auto attack on, like if you didn't have auto attack on, right, you would walk into this bush, and unless you manually clicked this person as soon as you see them, you wouldn't start hitting them. By having attack move on, if I move into a bush, or having auto attack on, as soon as I get in here, I start hitting this person automatically. And if I attack move into the bush like this, I'll also start hitting them automatically. I think the attack move is even faster actually there. If you didn't have those things on, you could actually just right click through here and never hit this person. But this is quite crucial. If you try to attack move into a bush like this in lane and there are minions, let's see if we can demonstrate this real quick. I might want to move into this bush and I want to immediately attack. This is maybe why it's a good idea, by the way, to have my auto attack setting on. If you want to move into this bush, I have attack move on cursor set, right? So what you think is going to happen is that I'm going to move into, well, the minions just died. You think I'm going to move into this bush, and if anyone's in here, I'm going to hit them as soon as I can. But instead, what actually happens is, even though I'm clicking into this bush, do you see how my character is going to auto attack the minions? That's not good.
Your team has destroyed
Because even if a person's in this bush, if you don't have vision of them, it still thinks that the closest thing to your cursor are these minions, right? So if I try to attack move into this bush, if I don't have vision, even if there's an enemy champion there, it's not going to attack this bush. It's going to take me into these minions, and that's terrible. What you can do by having auto attack on, like I showed before with this target dummy in here, is that, well, if I was doing this attack move thing into a bush, so if I know there's somebody in here, or I think there's somebody in here, and I want to hit them as soon as possible, if I have auto attack off, and I attack move into the bush, I'll end up autoing a minion and walking the wrong direction. If I have, even if I have attack move on cursor on, if I have auto attack on and I just right click in the bush, it'll hit them as soon as I get in, just like if I attack moved without accidentally moving me towards the minions. So these are important things. So attack move on cursor, auto attack, and then you know, we talked about this with the tilde key. When you have this setting on, it's a toggle, so it'll stay on instead of having to hold it down. And you definitely can't hold this down while you're like diving or something like that, because you need to be able to have your fingers on like Q, W, E, and R, and so there's no way you can hold this down. So you have to have this on so it's a toggle. And that concludes the in-game settings for League of Legends. Hopefully we can move on to bigger and better things and get into some of the game. So thank you.